In the shadows of Manhattan's glittering skyscrapers, a homeless man named John Davis was about to shatter a criminal empire. To the notorious gang leader Victor Rodriguez, he seemed like just another vagrant to terrorize, until the day they pushed him too far at Maria's soup kitchen. What Victor and his ruthless crew didn't know was that this scraggly bearded drifter was actually Elliot Morgan, a tech billionaire worth $4.2 billion, who had left everything behind to honor his brother's tragic death. 4 months earlier, Elliot had ignored his younger brother Danny's desperate calls for help, too consumed by corporate mergers to notice his siblings' descent into homelessness. When Danny was found dead under the 7th Street Bridge, Elliot made a vow that would transform him from power broker to street dweller overnight. Now, as Victor's gang tightened their grip on the neighborhood through violence and corruption, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about judging people by appearances. What began as routine intimidation of society's forgotten souls would trigger an extraordinary chain of events, exposing a web of corruption that reached from the streets all the way to City Hall, and forever changing the lives of an entire community that had lost hope. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The incessant beeping of hospital monitors pierced through Elliot Morgan's nightmare. His eyes snapped open, but the memories wouldn't fade. They never did. "Danny, please, just give me some time," Dream Elliot was saying, fingers hovering over his phone screen. "I have this major merger happening, and I'm not asking for much, Danny's voice cracked. I need help. Real help this time. The shelter's full, and it's getting cold. Look, I'll transfer some money, okay? Same as always. But I can't drop everything right now. Use it to get a motel room or something." "That's not." Danny's voice faded into static, replaced by a different memory. Detective Sarah Chun standing in Elliot's penthouse office, her expression grave. "Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry to inform you that we found your brother's body this morning. Under the 7th Street Bridge." Elliot jerked upright in his bed, sweat coating his forehead. The silk sheets felt suffocating. 3 months had passed since Danny's death, but the nightmares came every night. He reached for the glass of water on his nightstand, his hands trembling. "Lights 40%, he commanded. The smart home system responded instantly, bathing his bedroom in a soft glow that did nothing to chase away the shadows in his mind. His phone buzzed. Another message from the board about the upcoming shareholders meeting. Another reminder of how he'd chosen his empire over his own brother. Elliot hurled the phone across the room, watching it bounce harmlessly off the plush carpeting. "What kind of person am I?" he whispered to the empty room. "What kind of brother?" The morning sun found him in his home office, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. He'd spent hours researching homeless statistics, shelter systems, social services, everything he should have understood when Danny first reached out for help. His executive assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Morgan? The board is waiting in the conference room." "Cancel it," Elliot said, his voice hoarse. "Cancel everything, sir." "The merger." "I said cancel everything." His voice broke. After a moment, he added more softly, "And Sarah? Take a paid vacation. A long one." "Mr. Morgan, are you all right?" Elliot stared at the last photo he had of Danny, both of them smiling at some charity gala years ago, before Danny's struggles with addiction began. Before Elliot started seeing him as a problem to be managed rather than a brother to be saved. "No," he whispered, "but maybe I can be." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Elliot worked methodically, his grief finally finding purpose. He called Emma Thorne, his most trusted lawyer and friend since law school. "You want to do what?" Emma's voice was sharp with concern. "Elliot, I know you're grieving, but this is crazy." He smiled grimly. "Maybe, but I need to understand, Emma. I need to know what Danny went through, what they all go through. There are other ways to help. Your foundation. Throwing money at the problem isn't enough anymore." Elliot's voice hardened. "I need you to set everything up exactly as we discussed. The blind trust, the emergency protocols, everything. And Emma? No one can know. Not the board, not the press. No one." Emma was silent for a long moment. "You really mean to do this, don't you?" "Danny tried to tell me about the reality out there. I wouldn't listen. Now I need to see it for myself. The transformation took time. Elliot grew out his neatly trimmed beard, stopped using his expensive skincare products. He practiced changing his posture, softening his crisp CEO diction into something less noticeable. Every morning, he studied his reflection, watching the polished billionaire fade away. Finally, the day arrived. Elliot stood in his walk-in closet one last time, surrounded by custom suits and rare watches. He changed into worn jeans and a threadbare jacket from a thrift store, leaving behind every trace of luxury except for a burner phone and a small amount of cash. "Goodbye, Elliot Morgan," he murmured, shouldering a weathered backpack. He'd created a new identity, John Davis, a former office worker who'd lost everything during the pandemic. Close enough to the truth to be believable, far enough to be safe. The city looked different from ground level. Without his tinted car windows and private entrances, everything felt exposed, raw. Elliot, now John, walked for hours, letting himself get lost in the maze of streets he thought he knew. His first night on the streets was a harsh education. The concrete was unforgiving, the cold seeping through his layers of clothing. Every passing shadow made him flinch. Every distant siren sent his heart racing. He'd chosen a spot near other homeless individuals, thinking there might be safety in numbers. He was wrong. "That's my spot." The shout jolted him awake. Two men were grappling nearby, their faces twisted with desperate rage. "My blanket." "Finders keepers," the larger man growled, yanking at a tattered wool blanket. "You left it." "I was just getting water." The smaller man's voice cracked. "Please, it's all I have." The fight exploded into violence. Elliot scrambled to his feet, instinctively reaching for his phone to call security before remembering where he was. Who he was supposed to be. He watched, helpless, as the larger man won through sheer brutality, leaving his opponent curled on the ground. "Welcome to the streets, pretty boy," a raspy voice said behind him. Elliot turned to find an elderly man watching him with knowing eyes. "First night? That obvious?" Elliot asked, his heart still racing. The old man chuckled, revealing missing teeth. "Like a neon sign. I'm Frank. Been out here longer than I care to count." "John," Elliot replied, the false name feeling strange on his tongue. Frank gestured to a relatively sheltered spot nearby. "Come on. You've got a lot to learn if you want to survive out here." Over the next few hours, Frank became Elliot's guide to his new reality. The older man spoke with a mixture of resignation and hard-won wisdom, pointing out the safest sleeping spots, the best times to visit different soup kitchens, which cops could be trusted, and which would destroy your belongings for fun. "Most important thing," Frank said, sharing a half-empty bag of chips, "stay invisible, especially from guys like them." Elliot followed Frank's pointing finger to a group of tough-looking men across the street. They were surrounding a young shop owner who was clearly terrified. "Protection money," Frank explained quietly. "Victor and his boys run this neighborhood. They're the worst kind of predators. The ones who prey on people who've already lost everything." Elliot watched as the gang's leader, Victor, smiled while his men smashed the shop's window. The owner's protest died in his throat as Victor leaned in close, whispering something that made all color drain from the man's face. "Why doesn't anyone stop them?" Elliot asked, his hands clenching into fists. Frank's laugh was bitter. "With what army? Cops are bought. City officials look the other way. And the rest of us? We're invisible, remember? That's the first rule of survival out here." Later that night, unable to sleep, Elliot pulled out his burner phone. He had memorized Emma's secure number. "Everything okay?" She answered on the first ring. "I'm fine," he whispered. "Just checking in. The trust is set up. Emergency protocols are in place. Are you sure about this?" Elliot thought about the blanket fight, about Frank's resigned wisdom, about Victor's cruel smile. More than ever, there's something rotten out here, Emma. Something Danny might have tried to tell me about. "Be careful," she urged. "You can't help anyone if you get yourself killed." "I will." Elliot ended the call, sliding the phone back into his hidden pocket. Above him, the stars were barely visible through the city's light pollution. Somewhere up there, in one of those gleaming towers, his old life continued without him. But down here, in the shadows where his brother had lived and died, a new mission was taking shape. Elliot closed his eyes, Danny's face floating in his memory. This time, he wouldn't look away. This time he would listen, even if it cost him everything. 2 weeks had passed since Elliot Morgan became John Davis. The transformation was no longer just physical. It was seeping into his bones, changing how he moved, how he thought. He learned to walk with his shoulders slightly hunched, eyes down but alert. The invisibility that Frank had talked about was becoming second nature. Dawn found him in his usual spot, tucked away in an alley behind a restaurant. The owner, Mr. Chun, pretended not to notice him there. It was a quiet understanding. Elliot kept the alley clean, and in return, sometimes a bag of day-old pastries would appear by the back door. Early bird again, John? Frank's familiar rasp preceded him into the alley. The older man had taken Elliot under his wing, teaching him the intricate dance of street survival. Couldn't sleep, Elliot replied, pulling out his worn journal. It was his one luxury, bought from a dollar store. In it, he documented everything he saw, everything he learned, every failure of the system that had failed his brother. Today's entry was about the shelter on 9th Street. He'd spent 3 hours in line yesterday, only to be turned away at sunset. No more beds, they said. Never mind the empty conference room I could see through the window. Never mind the temperature dropping below freezing. Policy is policy. How many others like Danny heard those same words? Writing in that book again? Frank settled beside him, pulling out a half-eaten sandwich from his coat. He tore it in half, offering part to Elliot. Careful with that. People get nervous about others keeping records. Someone has to, Elliot said quietly, accepting the sandwich with a nod of thanks. Someone has to remember. Their breakfast was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Both men tensed until they saw Maria Rodriguez's familiar figure at the alley's entrance, carrying 2 steaming cups. Coffee, she offered with a warm smile. It's fresh. Just opened the kitchen. Maria's soup kitchen, Hope's table, had become Elliot's anchor in this new world. It wasn't just the food, though God knew the hot meals were a blessing. It was Maria herself, the way she treated everyone who came through her doors with dignity. You're an angel, Maria, Frank said, cradling the cup like treasure. Angels don't have overdue rent notices, she replied, but her smile never wavered. Coming in for lunch today? Wouldn't miss it, Elliot said. He'd noticed the worn edges of her clothes, the careful way she portioned everything to stretch their supplies. Yet somehow, she never turned anyone away hungry. After she left, Frank's expression grew serious. Speaking of rent, Victor's been sniffing around her place more often. Elliot's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He'd seen Victor's operation up close now, the systematic way his gang extracted protection money from every business in the neighborhood. Those who couldn't pay faced escalating consequences. She can't afford their demands, Elliot said. Frank snorted. None of us can. But Victor's got half the beat cops in his pocket, and City Councilman Green looks the other way. They're untouchable. No one's untouchable, Elliot muttered, then caught himself. John Davis wouldn't say that. John Davis would know better. The soup kitchen was crowded at lunch. Elliot helped Maria set up, noting how she remembered everyone's names, their dietary restrictions, their stories. Today she was serving her grandmother's chicken soup, the smell bringing a steady stream of hungry people through the doors. My abuela always said food feeds the body, but kindness feeds the soul, Maria told him as they worked. She built this place 40 years ago. I promised her I'd keep it going, even with Victor's people causing trouble. Elliot asked carefully. Maria's eyes hardened. Especially then, this neighborhood needs more than just meals. It needs hope. As if summoned by his name, Victor appeared in the doorway. The usual chatter died immediately. He moved like a shark through the crowd, 2 of his men flanking him. Elliot recognized them from his notes. Rico and Marcus, Victor's main enforcers. Ms. Rodriguez. Victor's voice was deceptively smooth. Have you reconsidered our conversation about community support? Maria straightened her spine. My answer hasn't changed, Victor. We're a nonprofit. Every penny goes to feeding people who need it. Things happen in this neighborhood, Victor said, running a finger along the clean counter. Bad things. Fires. Break-ins. Would be a shame if... Is there a problem here? Elliot stepped forward, heart pounding. He shouldn't draw attention, shouldn't get involved. But Maria's soup kitchen was too important to lose. Victor's gaze shifted to him, eyes narrowing. Do I know you? John Davis, Elliot said evenly. Just a volunteer? Well, John, Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. This is a private business discussion. Why don't you go back to serving soup? There's nothing private about extortion, Elliot said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victor stepped closer into Elliot's personal space. You've got a big mouth for a homeless bum. Better be careful it doesn't get you into trouble. He turned back to Maria. 3 days. Then we'll see how well hope feeds people when this place is ash. After Victor left, the kitchen slowly came back to life. Maria touched Elliot's arm. You shouldn't have done that. He's dangerous. So is letting him win, Elliot replied. That night, unable to sleep, Elliot found himself at the spot where they'd found Danny's body. The underside of the 7th Street Bridge was a popular shelter, but tonight it was empty. Maybe others felt Danny's ghost too. He pulled out his journal, writing by the dim light of a street lamp. Danny, I'm starting to understand now. It's not just the lack of resources. It's the systematic way society looks away. The casual cruelty. The assumption that people like you somehow deserve their fate. I'm sorry I was part of that system. I'm sorry I looked away too. A sound made him close the journal quickly. But it was just Tommy, one of the regulars from the soup kitchen. The teenager was clutching a book, looking embarrassed. Sorry, Tommy mumbled. Didn't know anyone was here. It's okay, Elliot said. He'd noticed Tommy always took extra napkins at the kitchen, using them to practice writing when he thought no one was looking. What are you reading? Tommy hesitated, then held up a battered copy of The Catcher in the Rye. Found it. But some of the words are hard. Elliot patted the concrete beside him. Want some help? For the next hour, they worked through the first chapter together. Tommy was smart, picking things up quickly once someone explained them. He reminded Elliot of Danny at that age, eager to learn, before the world started beating him down. Same time tomorrow? Tommy asked hopefully when they finished. Count on it, Elliot promised. The next day, he showed Frank a trick he'd learned for securing belongings, a simple lock mechanism using zip ties and a rubber band. It won't stop a determined thief, but it'll slow them down, make them look for easier targets. Frank's eyes narrowed. Where'd an office worker learn stuff like that? You pick things up, Elliot said vaguely. He was getting better at deflecting questions about his past, but he knew his curiosity about Victor's operation was drawing attention. His suspicions were confirmed that afternoon when Rico cornered him behind the grocery store. Boss wants to know why you're asking so many questions about our business. Just trying to understand how things work around here, Elliot said. Rico grabbed his shirt, slamming him against the wall. Here's how things work. You keep your nose out of other people's business, or we give you a personal demonstration of what happens to nosy people. Everything okay here? A police car had pulled up. Officer Jenkins, one of the cops Frank had warned him about. Just having a friendly chat. Rico smiled, releasing Elliot. Right, John? Right, Elliot said, shooting a knowing look at Jenkins. The officer's discomfort was visible, but he drove away without comment. That evening, Maria served her special empanadas. Elliot watched her work, amazed at how she maintained her compassion despite everything. When she stepped out for a break, he followed. You should take Victor's threat seriously, he said. I do, she replied, looking tired. But if I give in to him, this place stops being what it's meant to be. It becomes just another part of his empire. There might be another way, Elliot said carefully. If someone were to gather evidence, expose his connection to the police. Maria touched his arm. John, please be careful. I've seen what happens to people who stand up to Victor. This isn't your fight. But it was, Elliot thought later, writing in his journal. It was exactly his fight. Danny had died because too many people decided it wasn't their problem, wasn't their fight. He wrote until his hand cramped, documenting everything. Victor's protection racket, the corrupted officers, the way the system was rigged against people like Maria who tried to help. Like Danny, who had just needed someone to care. Quite the writer, aren't you? Victor's voice made him freeze. The gang leader emerged from the shadows, flanked by his men. I've been watching you, John. You're not like the others. You ask too many questions. Notice too many things. Elliot closed his journal carefully. Just trying to survive like everyone else? No, Victor smiled. You're looking for something. Or someone. And until I figure out what that is, you're going to be a problem. He nodded to his men, who stepped forward menacingly. Last warning. Stay out of my business. or your next journal entry will be written in blood." They melted away into the night, leaving Elliot with his racing heart and racing thoughts. He pulled out his burner phone, staring at Emma's number. One call, and he could end this charade, return to his safe, comfortable life. Instead, he opened his journal again. "Danny, I won't fail them like I failed you. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, I'm going to finish what I started. This time, I'm not looking away." The city lights flickered above him, stars lost in their glare. Somewhere out there, Victor was planning his next move, but so was Elliot. The game was changing, and neither of them knew just how high the stakes would become. The early morning fog clung to the streets like a shroud, turning familiar shapes into looming shadows. Elliot huddled deeper into his worn jacket, watching his breath form small clouds in the cold air. 3 months on the streets had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments before the city fully awakened. A woman's desperate cry shattered the silence. "Please no. It's all I have." Elliot recognized the voice, Rose, an elderly woman who frequented Maria's soup kitchen. She'd once been a teacher before medical bills destroyed her life savings. The sound came from around the corner, and Elliot's feet were moving before his mind could catch up. The scene unfolded like a nightmare. Victor's men, Rico and Marcus, were ransacking Rose's cart while she clutched desperately at a small photo album. Victor himself stood watching, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Consider this your contribution to neighborhood improvement," Victor was saying, his tone mockingly gentle. "Can't have all this trash cluttering up our streets." "Those aren't trash," Rose's voice trembled. "Those are my memories. My children's pictures." Marcus yanked the album from her hands, tossing it toward a nearby dumpster. Something in Elliot snapped. "That's enough." His voice cut through the morning air like a whip. 3 months of careful anonymity, of playing the invisible man, evaporated in an instant. Victor turned slowly, raising an eyebrow. "Well, if it isn't our nosy friend John, come to write another chapter in your little diary." Elliot moved between Rose and the gang members, his heart hammering, but his voice steady. "Let her be. She's done nothing to you." "Nothing." Victor took a long drag from his cigarette, blowing smoke in Elliot's face. "She exists. She makes our neighborhood look bad. That's enough." He studied Elliot with growing interest. "You know what I can't figure out about you? Most street rats know their place. But you act like you've got nothing to lose." "Everyone has something to lose," Elliot replied, keeping his voice level. "Even you, Victor." The gang leader's amused expression hardened. "Is that a threat?" "Just an observation." Victor's movement was lightning fast. His hand shot out, grabbing Elliot's throat and slamming him against the brick wall. "Let me make an observation of my own. You're nothing. A worthless bum who thinks he's better than he is. And if you don't learn your place." His grip tightened, making Elliot gasp for air. Behind them, Rose whimpered. "Boss," Rico called out suddenly. "Cops." Victor released Elliot, straightening his jacket. "Clean this up," he ordered his men, then leaned close to Elliot's ear. "This isn't over." As the gang retreated, Elliot helped Rose gather her scattered belongings. The photo album had landed in a puddle, its pages warped but salvageable. Rose clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered face. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Victor never forgets a slight." "Neither do I," Elliot replied, thinking of Danny. He walked Rose to Maria's soup kitchen, ensuring she got a hot meal and a safe place to rest. Maria took one look at the bruises forming on his neck and pulled him into the kitchen's back room. "Dios mío, John. What happened?" Before he could answer, Frank burst through the door, his face flushed with anger and fear. "Are you out of your mind? Taking on Victor in broad daylight. He was hurting Rose." "He hurts everyone." Frank's voice cracked. "That's what he does. That's what this whole damn system does. You think you're the first person to try standing up to him?" Maria pressed a cold compress to Elliot's neck. "Frank's right. Victor's men, they did terrible things to the last person who challenged him. Miguel Ramirez, a local teacher. He disappeared 3 years ago." Elliot accepted the compress, but shook his head. "So, we just let him win? Let him terrorize people who've already lost everything? We survive," Frank said firmly. "That's what we do. That's what your brother should have done." The room went silent. Elliot stared at Frank, who looked away uncomfortably. I hear you talk to him sometimes, Frank admitted. At night. Danny, you call him? Maria touched Elliot's hand gently. Everyone here has lost someone, John. The streets, they take and take. But getting yourself killed won't bring your brother back. No, Elliot agreed quietly. But maybe I can stop other brothers, other sisters from dying alone under bridges. He left before they could argue further, his mind already forming plans. Victor's confrontation had made one thing clear. Playing it safe wasn't enough. He needed evidence, needed to understand how deep the corruption went. Over the next few weeks, Elliot became Victor's shadow. He documented everything: the protection racket payments, the deals with corrupt cops, the systematic intimidation of anyone who resisted. His journal filled with names, dates, patterns. The public library became his command center. Most homeless people were discouraged from lingering there, but Elliot had learned to blend in, to look just respectable enough to avoid attention. He used the computers during off-peak hours, carefully researching Victor's known associates, building a web of connections. Hello again, Mr. Davis. Elliot froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Victor's reflection appeared in the computer screen, smiling that shark-like smile. Quite the dedicated researcher, aren't you? Victor pulled up a chair, sitting too close. Fascinating choice of reading material. Police reports, property records, city council minutes. Almost like you're building a case. Just trying to educate myself. Elliot kept his voice neutral, closing the browser windows. See, that's what bothers me. Victor leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your vocabulary, your computer skills, the way you carry yourself. You're not what you pretend to be. I'm exactly what you see. Elliot stood, gathering his things. A homeless man trying to survive. Victor's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. No, you're someone playing a part, and I'm going to figure out why. Elliot pulled free, maintaining his composure as he walked out of the library. But inside, his mind was racing. He'd gotten sloppy, too confident. He needed to be more careful. That night, he returned to his sleeping spot behind Mr. Chen's restaurant to find it destroyed. His few possessions were scattered and broken, the cardboard he used for bedding shredded and soaked. Spray painted on the wall above. Know your place. They came just after sunset. Mr. Chen appeared in the back doorway, looking apologetic. I tried to stop them, but it's not your fault, Elliot assured him. Thank you for telling me. He salvaged what he could, including his journal, which he'd taken to hiding separately. Frank appeared as he was finishing, carrying a spare blanket. Told you he never forgets, the older man said, handing over the blanket. There's space near my spot if you want it. Thank you, but I can't put you at risk. Frank snorted. Bit late for that, isn't it? You've made yourself a target, which means anyone who helps you is a target. But here's the thing about being homeless. Can't take away what you've already lost. The next few days were a dangerous dance. Elliot tried to lay low, but Victor's men seemed to be everywhere. They followed him openly now, making sure he saw them watching. At the soup kitchen, other homeless people began to keep their distance, fear of association overwhelming their friendship. Only Maria remained steadfast, though worry lined her face deeper each day. Someone was asking about you, she told him one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. A man in an expensive suit. He wasn't one of Victor's people. Elliot's pulse quickened. What did he want? He asked how long you've been coming here, who you talked to. I told him nothing, of course. But John, who are you really? What have you gotten yourself into? Before he could answer, Victor appeared in the doorway. The usual kitchen chatter died instantly. Time for another chat, John. Victor's voice carried across the room. Outside, Elliot squeezed Maria's hand reassuringly before following Victor into the alley. Rico and Marcus flanked the exit, cutting off escape. I've been doing some digging of my own, Victor said, producing a phone. Funny thing about homeless people, they tend to have history. Records. But you? You appeared out of nowhere 3 months ago. No history, no records, nothing before you started sleeping in my neighborhood and asking questions about my business. What do you want, Victor? The truth. Victor's friendly facade vanished. Who are you working for? The cops? The feds? Some rival trying to move in on my territory. You're paranoid, Elliot said. I'm nobody. Victor's fist connected with his stomach, driving the air from his lungs. As Elliot doubled over, Victor grabbed his hair, forcing him to look up. Wrong answer. Want to try again? Through the pain, Elliot managed to smile. You're scared, aren't you? The mighty Victor, terrorized by a homeless man asking questions. The next blow caught him across the face, sending him sprawling. Through blurry vision, he saw Maria in the doorway, her hands covering her mouth in horror. Get back inside, Victor snapped at her. This doesn't concern you. Everything that happens in this neighborhood concerns me. Maria's voice shook, but she stood her ground. Leave him alone, Victor, or I start making calls of my own. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then laughed. You got guts, Maria, but you're playing a dangerous game. He looked down at Elliot. Both of you are. After they left, Maria helped Elliot inside, cleaning his cuts with gentle hands. This has to stop, John. Please. Whatever you're trying to prove, whatever you're looking for, it's not worth dying for. But Elliot barely heard her. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of something that chilled his blood. A familiar figure watching from across the street. James Patterson, his former head of security. Had Emma sent him? No, she wouldn't risk exposing his cover. Which meant someone else had figured out something was wrong. Someone else was looking for Elliot Morgan. The game was changing, becoming more dangerous by the day. Victor's paranoia, Patterson's appearance, the growing risk to everyone who helped him. Elliot touched his bruised face, remembering Danny's final days. I won't fail this time, little brother, he thought. Whatever it takes, I'll see this through. In the deepening shadows across the street, Patterson's figure melted away, but Elliot knew he'd be back. The hunt was on, and he was caught between two worlds. The ruthless gang leader who knew he was hiding something, and his old life threatening to expose everything. The numbers didn't lie. They never had, not in Elliot's years building his business empire, and not now as he traced the flow of money through Victor's organization. He'd spent weeks piecing it together, using skills honed in boardrooms to follow the web of transactions that flowed through the neighborhood. Protection money isn't enough, he muttered, scribbling calculations in his journal. The amounts don't match the operation scale. He was sitting in his new hiding spot, a forgotten maintenance room in the basement of an abandoned building. The space was tiny, but it had become his war room, walls covered with notes and diagrams only he could decipher. A pattern was emerging, darker than anything he'd imagined. The protection racket was just the surface, a smokescreen for something much larger. Every Thursday, large sums moved through several businesses, always cash, always just under reporting thresholds. But the source of that money remained elusive. Until the night, he followed Rico to the warehouse district. The moon was hidden behind clouds as Elliot crouched behind a dumpster, watching trucks arrive at regular intervals. The drivers spoke various languages, Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, but money changed hands in the universal language of crisp hundreds. 10 more tonight, he heard Rico tell Victor, who supervised from the shadows. The container ships leave at dawn. Elliot's blood ran cold as realization dawned. The trucks weren't carrying goods. They were carrying people. Human cargo, trapped in an international trafficking network with Victor's organization as a key hub. Welcome to America. Victor's voice dripped with mock hospitality as another truck departed. Land of opportunity. For those who can afford it. The next morning found Elliot at the public library, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Years of corporate espionage had taught him how to navigate secure systems, and the city's outdated networks were child's play in comparison. Property records, shell companies, tax assessments, he murmured, diving deeper. Follow the money. Names and connections blossomed across his screen. Victor's organization had tentacles everywhere. Shell companies owning properties across the city, dummy corporations funneling money through legitimate businesses, and most damning of all, regular payments to key city officials. Councilman Green, Elliot's eyes narrowed at a particular transaction. Monthly payments through an offshore account. No wonder you look the other way. Finding anything interesting? Elliot nearly jumped out of his skin. The librarian, Miss Patel, stood behind him with a knowing look. She'd been one of the few who hadn't questioned his presence, even helping him navigate the archives. Just researching local history, he said smoothly, closing the windows. Funny kind of history, she replied quietly. The kind that gets people killed. Before he could respond, she slipped him a USB drive. Security cameras caught Victor's men breaking in last night. They copied the computer logs. Thought you should know. Elliot's mind raced. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said. Just be careful. And maybe look into the zoning changes from last spring. Interesting reading. The zoning changes revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Victor's gang wasn't just trafficking people. They were systematically taking over the neighborhood. Businesses that refused to launder money were harassed until they sold, usually to one of Victor's shell companies. Properties were rezoned for development that never happened, driving out longtime residents. Maria's soup kitchen, Elliot realized. It's not just about protection money. They want the whole block. He needed to share this information. Using a burner phone, he arranged to meet Emma at a coffee shop across town. You look terrible, were her first words as she sat down. Thanks, he managed a smile. The homeless lifestyle isn't big on spa days. Elliot, this has gone too far. The board is asking questions. James Patterson is sniffing around. I know I saw him. Elliot slid a thick envelope across the table. But this is bigger than my company. Victor's running an international trafficking ring, Emma, using the neighborhood as a front and corrupting city officials to keep it hidden. Emma's eyes widened as she reviewed the documents. This is comprehensive, but also circumstantial. We need more to bring him down. I'm working on that. But I need you to do something first. He wrote down an address. Maria's Soup Kitchen. Set up a blind trust. Buy the whole block if you have to. We need to protect it. The woman you mentioned in your messages? Elliot, are you sure? She's the heart of that community, he said firmly. If Victor destroys her place, he destroys hope itself. I won't let that happen. After Emma left, Elliot walked back toward his territory, mind churning with plans. A commotion in an alley caught his attention, angry voices and the sound of someone crying. Please, I don't want to. Shut up, kid. You don't have a choice anymore. Elliot peered around the corner. Victor and his men had a teenager cornered, Jason, one of the regulars from Maria's kitchen. The boy's face was bruised, tears streaming down his cheeks. Your mother owes us, Victor was saying. But I'm generous. You work for me, her debt disappears. Simple as that. I won't sell drugs. Jason's voice shook. I won't. Rico's backhand sent him sprawling. Who said anything about selling? You got other talents. Pretty face like yours. Elliot's vision went red. All he could see was Danny at that age, vulnerable and desperate. Before he could move, Frank appeared from nowhere, helping Jason to his feet. Boys with me, Frank said, his usual submissive posture replaced with steel. Got him a job at the recycling center. He'll pay his mother's debt honest. Victor studied Frank for a long moment. Since when do you stick your neck out, old man? Since now. Frank met his gaze steadily. Some lines you don't cross. To Elliot's surprise, Victor laughed. Fine, but the debt doubles. And if he misses a payment, he left the threat hanging as he and his men departed. Elliot helped Frank get Jason to Maria's kitchen. The boy was shaking but alive. Thank you, Jason whispered to Frank. Don't thank me yet, Frank replied grimly. Working off the debt won't be easy. You won't have to, Elliot said. Both turned to look at him. I promise you this ends soon. Later, he pulled Maria aside, showing her some of what he'd discovered. The protection money, the harassment, it's not random. They're systematically taking over the neighborhood. Your kitchen is one of the last holdouts. Dios mio, Maria crossed herself. The missing girls from the shelter, the teenagers disappearing. You think Victor? I know he is, and he's got city officials in his pocket. Maria, please, let me help you protect this place. She squared her shoulders. This kitchen has been here for 40 years. My grandmother built it with her own hands. I won't run. I'm not asking you to run, Elliot said softly. I'm asking you to survive, to keep helping people who need you. Victor's operation is bigger than we imagined, and when he falls, the backlash will be violent. You sound very certain he'll fall. He will? Elliot's voice hardened. I promise you that. But Victor wasn't making it easy. Elliot noticed more unfamiliar faces watching him, taking pictures. His movements were tracked, his conversations monitored. Boss wants to know about every person you talk to, Rico told him one day, not bothering to hide his surveillance. Every place you go, every breath you take. I'm flattered by the attention. Rico grabbed his shirt. You think this is a game? Boss knows you're not what you pretend to be. Matter of time before we find out who you really are. Maybe I'm exactly who I pretend to be, Elliot replied. A homeless man who's tired of watching people suffer. No homeless man uses words like systematically and infrastructure. Victor's voice came from behind him. No homeless man understands shell corporations and offshore accounts. The question is, who are you really? Elliot turned slowly. Victor's usual smirk was gone, replaced by cold calculation. You move like someone trained, Victor continued. You understand business, computers, finance. You're educated, probably wealthy once. But why come here? Why risk everything to dig into my operations? Maybe I just hate bullies. No. Victor stepped closer. This is personal for you. The way you protected that kid today, the way you defend Maria's kitchen. Like you're trying to make up for something. Or someone. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. Victor smiled, seeing the reaction. Ah, there it is. Who did you lose? Who are you trying to save now that you couldn't save then? You talk too much, Victor. Maybe. But I'm also thorough. My men are looking into every overdose, every suicide, every homeless death in the past year. Sooner or later, we'll find a connection. And then, he patted Elliot's cheek mockingly. Then we'll have a real conversation. That night, Elliot met Emma again, this time in a different part of town. They're getting close, he told her. Victor's investigating recent homeless deaths. If they find Danny's records. They won't, Emma assured him. I've buried them deep. But Elliot, maybe it's time to end this. We have enough to start an investigation. Not enough to guarantee conviction. Not enough to protect everyone involved. Elliot ran a hand through his beard. Victor's operation is like a hydra. Cut off one head. 2 more grow back. We need to destroy the whole thing at once. And if they expose you first, then make sure the evidence gets to the right people. He handed her another envelope. Everything I've found so far. Names, dates, connections. If anything happens to me, don't. Emma's voice cracked. Don't talk like that. Promise me, Emma. Promise you'll finish what I started. She took the envelope with trembling hands. I promise. But please be careful. Danny wouldn't want you to die for this. Danny didn't want to die alone under a bridge either, Elliot replied softly. Sometimes we don't get what we want. Back in his hidden room, Elliot updated his wall of evidence. Victor's operation was like a spider's web, with threads connecting seemingly unrelated events. The trafficking ring, the money laundering, the property takeovers, all part of a larger plan to control not just the neighborhood, but a significant chunk of the city's underground economy. But spider webs had weak points, and Elliot was getting very close to finding them. A noise outside made him freeze. Footsteps, then voices. The old factory on Wilson Street, someone was saying, check every room. Boss wants to know where he disappears to. Elliot quickly gathered his most important documents. They were getting too close. The game was reaching its climax, and the next move would determine everything. As he slipped away through a hidden exit, he thought of Danny, of Jason, of all the lives Victor had destroyed or twisted to serve his empire. The time for gathering evidence was ending. Soon, it would be time for justice. The morning sun hadn't yet reached the windows of Hope's table when Victor walked in. Maria was alone in the kitchen, preparing the day's first batch of soup, when she heard the bell above the door chime. Her hand stilled on the ladle as footsteps approached. Too many footsteps for this early hour. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Victor's voice carried the false warmth of a shark's smile. Something smells delicious. Maria turned slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Victor stood in the doorway to her kitchen, flanked by Rico and Marcus. 2 more of his men blocked the front entrance. We're not open yet, she said firmly. Oh, I'm not here for soup? Victor ran a finger along the clean counter. I'm here to discuss business. One last time, Maria's chin lifted. I've told you before. Yes, you're a non-profit. Every penny goes to feeding the hungry. Victor's smile vanished. But things change, Maria. The neighborhood is changing. Progress, you might say. He pulled out a thick envelope, placing it on the counter. $20,000. More than fair for this charitable establishment. Sell now, walk away clean. This kitchen isn't for sale. Not to you. Not to anyone. Victor's expression hardened. Then let me be clear about your alternatives. He nodded to Marcus, who produced a red gasoline can. Old buildings like this, they're so vulnerable to accidents. Faulty wiring, gas leaks, tragic, really? You wouldn't dare. No. Victor leaned closer. Your grandson, Miguel, he just started at Roosevelt Elementary, yes? Such a dangerous walk to school these days. Maria's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. Get out of my kitchen. You have until sunset, Victor said softly. Take the money, or we'll make an example of this place. And anyone inside it. The bell chimed again. Elliot stood in the doorway, his presence filling the small space despite his ragged appearance. Making threats before breakfast, Victor? His voice carried across the room. That seems desperate. Even for you. Victor turned slowly. This is a private business discussion. Nothing about your business is private anymore. Elliot moved further into the room, positioning himself between Victor and Maria. Everyone knows what you are now. A coward who preys on the vulnerable because you're too weak to face real opposition. The kitchen fell silent. No one spoke to Victor this way. Not if they wanted to live. Brave words from a homeless bum. Victor's voice was deadly quiet. Truth hurts, doesn't it? Elliot continued, raising his voice. The mighty Victor, terrorizing old women and children because he's afraid. Afraid of people seeing him for what he really is. A small man playing at being powerful. Victor's hand shot out, but Elliot was ready this time. He caught Victor's wrist, using the larger man's momentum to slam him against the counter. Years of martial arts training, muscle memory his weeks on the street couldn't erase, took over. Touch anyone in this kitchen again, Elliot growled, and I'll show you what real power looks like. Rico and Marcus moved forward, but Victor waved them back. His eyes never left Elliot's face. You just signed your death warrant, he said softly. Maybe, Elliot released him. But I'm not the only one watching anymore. As if on cue, people began filtering into the kitchen. The regulars, Rose with her photo album, Tommy clutching his books, Jason and his mother, Mr. Chun from his restaurant. Dozens more followed, filling the space with quiet determination. What is this? Victor straightened his jacket, trying to regain his composure. Community, Elliot replied simply. Something you wouldn't understand. Rose stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. You took my pictures, my memories. No more. You threatened my son, Jason's mother added. Made him work off a debt that wasn't even real. One by one, others spoke up. Years of abuse, extortion, and fear poured out. Victor's face darkened with each new accusation. This changes nothing, he snarled. You're all nothing. Street trash. No, Victor, Elliot's voice cut through the murmurs. We're witnesses, and we're not afraid anymore. The next few days transformed the neighborhood. Word spread quickly. Someone had finally stood up to Victor and lived. Small acts of defiance bloomed like flowers through concrete. Elliot moved quickly, teaching people how to document everything. Your phones are weapons, he explained to a gathered group in the kitchen. Record every threat, every demand for money. Note times, dates, witnesses. What good will it do? Someone asked. The cops are in his pocket. The cops aren't the only ones watching anymore, Elliot replied, sharing a knowing look with Emma, who sat quietly in the corner pretending to be another homeless person. Frank's voice carried unexpected authority as he addressed the group. 10 years ago, Victor's men burned down the homeless shelter on Oak Street. 3 people died. The official report called it an electrical fire. The old man's usually stooped shoulders were straight as he continued. Before that, it was the Rivera family's grocery store. Then Miguel Ramirez's disappearance. Each time, we looked away. Each time, we told ourselves we couldn't fight back. His eyes met Elliot's. But someone finally showed us we can. The community's resistance grew stronger each day. When Victor's men came to collect protection money, they found locked doors and recording phones. When they tried to intimidate local businesses, they faced unified opposition. But Victor's retaliation was swift and brutal. Elliot arrived at Hope's table one morning to find the windows shattered, the interior destroyed. Soup pots lay overturned, food supplies ruined, spray painted across the walls. Just the beginning. Maria stood in the midst of the destruction, tears streaming down her face. They took Miguel's school pictures, she whispered. Left this instead. She handed Elliot a photo of her grandson on his walk to school, clearly taken that morning. The threat was obvious. "I can't risk him," she said. "Maybe I should take Victor's offer." "No." Elliot pulled out his phone, dialing Emma. "We're done playing defense." The lawsuit hit the city like a bombshell. Systematic corruption exposed, the headlines screamed. City officials implicated in organized crime. Emma had crafted the legal document perfectly, laying out years of evidence. Property records, financial transactions, testimonies from community members, all pointing to a massive conspiracy of negligence and corruption. "This is just the beginning," Emma told reporters outside the courthouse. "We have evidence of city officials actively protecting a criminal enterprise that preys on vulnerable communities. The public deserves answers." Victor's response was predictable. That night, Maria's kitchen burned. The community watched in horror as flames consumed the building. But instead of cowering, they gathered. Phones recorded everything: the suspicious timing, the smell of gasoline, Victor's men watching from the shadows. 40 years. Maria's voice shook as she watched her grandmother's legacy burn. 40 years of helping people, of giving hope. "It's not the end," Elliot promised her. "Just a new beginning." The next morning, the community gathered again. Not in fear or hiding, but in strength. Hundreds of people, homeless and housed, business owners and residents, stood together in peaceful protest. Signs rose above the crowd: "Justice for Hope's table," "End corruption now," "Victor's violence stops here." News cameras captured it all. Reporters interviewed community members, each sharing their story of Victor's tyranny. Frank's testimony about the shelter fire brought many to tears. Rose spoke about having her memories stolen. Jason and his mother described the forced labor and threats. From his car across the street, Victor watched the protest with growing rage. His phone buzzed constantly, nervous associates seeing the media coverage, wondering if their connections would be exposed next. "Want us to break it up?" Rico asked, knuckles cracking. Victor gripped his steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "No, let them have their little moment. They'll learn soon enough what happens to people who defy me." But as he watched the crowd grow larger, saw the determination in their faces, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. For the first time, he faced an enemy he couldn't intimidate or buy off, an entire community united against him. Elliot moved through the crowd, offering encouragement and guidance. "Keep it peaceful. Stay focused. Document everything." Emma's latest message brought more good news. Judge granted emergency injunction. City officials named in lawsuit suspended pending investigation. The protests continued into the evening, candlelight replacing sunlight, as people shared stories of loss and hope. Maria led them in prayer, her voice strong despite everything. "My grandmother built this kitchen because she believed in hope," she told the crowd. She believed that even in the darkest times, communities could come together, could stand against evil. She looked at the burnt ruins of Hope's table, then at the faces surrounding her. Victor didn't destroy her dream today. He made it stronger. Because now we know, we are not alone anymore. Elliot stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the scene unfold. His phone buzzed. "Emma again. Media's digging deeper," she texted. Victor's international connections starting to surface. "FBI interested." Another message followed. "But be careful. He's most dangerous when cornered." Looking across the street, Elliot caught Victor's eye. The gang leader's face was a mask of cold fury, promising retribution. But for the first time, there was something else in his expression too. Fear. The community stand had changed everything. The careful facade of Victor's empire, the illusion of legitimate business covering criminal enterprise, was cracking. His political protection was eroding. His air of invincibility shattered. But Elliot knew the battle was far from over. Victor would strike back harder than ever, trying to terrorize the community back into submission. The coming days would test their unity, their courage, their resolve. As darkness fell, the protesters began dispersing, but their spirit remained. Small groups gathered to plan the next day's actions. Others organized security patrols to protect vulnerable members. The neighborhood was transforming from Victor's territory into a community united against him. Elliot helped Maria salvage what they could from the kitchen's ruins. In the ashes, They found her grandmother's old crucifix, blackened but unbroken. A sign, she said, clutching it close. That hope survives. More than survives, Elliot replied, watching the last protesters disperse into the night. It grows stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. Victor's desperation would make him more dangerous than ever. But tonight, something powerful had awakened in the community, something that no amount of violence could extinguish. The spark of resistance had become a flame of its own. The frame-up was masterfully orchestrated. Victor had waited until Elliot was helping at the temporary soup kitchen they'd set up in the church basement. While Elliot distributed meals, Rico slipped Mr. Chen's cash register receipts into his coat pocket. The police arrived minutes later. "That's him," Mr. Chen said woodenly, avoiding Elliot's eyes. The restaurant owner's split lip and trembling hands told their own story. He took today's earnings. Officer Jenkins, one of Victor's paid men, roughly yanked Elliot's arms behind his back. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as Jenkins made a show of searching him. Well, Jenkins pulled out the planted receipts. "Look what we have here." "Those aren't mine," Elliot said calmly, though his heart raced. "You know this is a setup." "Shut up." Jenkins slammed him against the wall. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." The ride to the precinct was rough, Jenkins hitting every pothole. In the holding cell, things got worse. Two officers, both on Victor's payroll, took turns questioning him. Confessed to the theft. Officer Sullivan's fist connected with Elliot's ribs. "Make this easy on yourself. You're better than this," Elliot gasped. "Both of you. Victor doesn't own you." Wrong answer. Another blow, this time to his kidney. "Try again." The beating continued until a sharp voice cut through the haze of pain. "What the hell is going on here?" Detective Sarah Harris stood in the doorway, her dark eyes taking in the scene. She was new to the precinct, transferred from major crimes, and notably absent from Victor's web of corruption. "Suspect resisted," Jenkins said smoothly. "Really?" Harris's voice dripped sarcasm. "While handcuffed to a table? Get out. Both of you." After they left, Harris studied Elliot's bruised face. "You're either very brave or very stupid, making enemies of Victor's pet officers. Why choose?" Elliot managed a painful smile. "Could be both. There's something different about you," she said slowly. "The way you speak, the way you carry yourself. You're not just another homeless man, are you?" Elliot met her gaze. "Would it matter if I wasn't?" "Maybe." She pulled out a notebook. "Because I've been watching Victor's operation for months, building a case. But someone keeps getting there first, gathering evidence, stirring up trouble. Sounds like you have a guardian angel. Sounds like I have a civilian putting themselves in danger." She leaned closer. "Who are you really?" Elliot considered his options. Someone who lost everything to people like Victor. Someone trying to make it right. By getting yourself killed? By exposing the truth? He shifted, wincing. "Check Victor's connection to the Hope Foundation. You might find it illuminating." Harris's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Emma burst into the room, all righteous legal fury. "This interview is over," she declared. "My client was arrested without probable cause, searched without warrant, and assaulted in custody. Shall I continue?" "Your client?" Harris raised an eyebrow. "Since when do homeless men have high-powered attorneys?" "Since the ACLU got involved," Emma replied smoothly. "Now, unless you're charging him." Harris studied them both for a long moment. "He's free to go. But this conversation isn't over." Emma helped Elliot out of the precinct. In the car, she handed him an ice pack. "Victor's spreading rumors," she said grimly. "Calling you a police informant. Saying you've been working undercover to betray the homeless community." "Clever." Elliot pressed the ice to his ribs. "Turn my greatest allies against me." The strategy was already working. When Elliot returned to the temporary kitchen, several regulars moved away from him. Others openly glared. "Snitch," someone muttered. "Traitor." "Is it true?" Tommy asked, hurt in his eyes. "Were you just pretending to help us?" Before Elliot could answer, Maria's voice rang out. "Shame on all of you." She stood in the center of the room, hands on hips. "This man has done nothing but help us. While Victor burns our kitchen, threatens our children, destroys our community, John stands with us. And you believe Victor's lies?" "But the police," someone began. The same police who watch Victor's men beat us? Who ignore our calls for help? Maria's voice rose. Victor is a coward who can only win through lies and fear. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. She turned to face Victor, who had appeared in the doorway. Where is Miguel Ramirez? What happened to the people who died in the shelter fire? How many lives have you destroyed while we looked away? Victor's smile was cold. Careful, Maria. Accusations like that could be dangerous. No more threats, she shot back. No more fear. God will judge your crimes, Victor. And so will we. Victor's retaliation came swiftly. The next morning, police raided the temporary kitchen, acting on an anonymous tip. They found drugs planted in the food supplies, hidden in Maria's office. This is ridiculous, Maria protested as Jenkins led her out in handcuffs. I would never. Save it for the judge, Jenkins smirked. Hope you have a good lawyer. She does. Emma stepped forward, having anticipated Victor's move. And we have security camera footage showing who really planted those drugs. Jenkins's smirk faltered. The raid fell apart as quickly as it had begun, but the damage was done. Health inspectors appeared, conducting routine investigations. Church officials received anonymous complaints about criminal elements using their space. They're trying to drive us out completely, Frank observed as they cleaned up after the raid. Cut off all support to the homeless community. Elliot nodded grimly. He'd spent nights in the library, tracing Victor's financial web. The connection to the Hope Foundation had been clever, a legitimate charity that served as a perfect money laundering operation. Donations going clean, he explained to Emma during their next meeting. Come out dirty, distributed through shell companies and offshore accounts. The foundation's director, Thomas Warner, is on Victor's payroll. That's the missing link we needed, Emma said. With this evidence. A gunshot shattered the cafe's window. Elliot tackled Emma as more shots followed, glass raining down around them. Are you hit? He asked when the shooting stopped. No. She was shaking but unhurt. Elliot, this is getting too dangerous. It's always been dangerous. He helped her up, but now we're close. Victor's getting desperate. That desperation became clearer each day. Victor's men were everywhere, watching, waiting. Elliot knew they were planning something big. The warning came from Frank, delivered in whispers behind the church. Tonight, the abandoned factory on Marshall Street. They're setting up an ambush. How do you know? Overheard Rico talking. They're going to take care of the problem once and for all. Frank gripped Elliot's arm. Don't go back to your usual spots. They're watching everything. Thanks to Frank's warning, Elliot avoided the trap. But he knew he couldn't run forever. The confrontation had to end. It came to a head in the church basement during the evening meal service. Victor walked in alone, his men blocking the exits. Enough games. His voice carried across the suddenly silent room. Time to end this. Elliot stood slowly. Ready to confess your crimes, Victor? Crimes? Victor laughed. I built this neighborhood. Everything I do for progress. For order. These people. He gestured dismissively at the homeless crowd. They're holding us back. They need to be managed. Like you managed Miguel Ramirez? Elliot's voice was steel. Like you managed the girls you traffic? The lives you destroy? You know nothing about my business. I know everything. Elliot moved closer. The Hope Foundation's secret accounts. The offshore transfers. The connections to international trafficking rings. Detective Harris knows too. Victor's facade cracked slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? Elliot smiled. Check your accounts, Victor. While you were trying to kill me, I was busy. Amazing what a few keystrokes can do to an entire criminal empire. Victor's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. What did you do? He whispered. The same thing you did to Maria's kitchen. I burned it all down. Elliot's voice carried clearly through the silent room. Every account, every connection, every dirty deal, exposed. The FBI is probably freezing your assets as we speak. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket. You're dead. You hear me? Dead. Kill me. Elliot spread his arms. In front of all these witnesses. Show everyone who you really are. The room's tension could have been cut with a knife. Victor's hand trembled on his concealed weapon. This isn't over, he finally snarled. You've just declared war. No, Victor. Elliot's voice was quiet but firm. The war is over. You just don't know it yet. Victor backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving Elliot's face. At the door, he turned to address the crowd. "Remember this moment." His voice shook with rage. "Remember what happens to people who cross me. Because tomorrow, I show this neighborhood what real power looks like." After he left, the basement erupted in worried whispers. Maria touched Elliot's arm. "What happens now?" Elliot watched the door where Victor had disappeared. "Now we finish this. One way or another." The stage was set for the final confrontation. Victor had lost his careful facade of legitimacy, his mask of neighborhood businessman stripped away to reveal the predator beneath. All that remained was raw violence, the last resort of a cornered animal. But Elliot had stopped running, stopped hiding. The time for shadows and secrets was ending. Tomorrow would bring violence, he knew. Tomorrow would test everything they'd built. The community's unity, their courage, their determination to reclaim their neighborhood from Victor's tyranny. But tomorrow would also bring truth, justice, an end to the cancer that had destroyed so many lives, including Danny's. As the community gathered closer, drawing strength from each other, Elliot felt a strange peace settle over him. Whatever happened next, he had kept his promise to his brother. He had stopped looking away. The war for the soul of the neighborhood was reaching its climax. And this time, the people would not stand alone. The press conference was set for noon outside the ruins of Hope's Table. Local news vans lined the street as Maria stood at the makeshift podium, surrounded by community members. Elliot watched from the crowd, counting the cameras. Everything had to be perfect. "We gather here today," Maria began, her voice strong despite her exhaustion, "to demand justice. To show the world what happens when corrupt men are allowed to prey on the vulnerable." The cameras rolled as she described the systematic destruction of their neighborhood. Behind her, large photos displayed the evidence of Victor's crimes. The burned kitchen, beaten homeless people, threatened business owners. Elliot checked his phone. Emma's message confirmed everything was in place. News helicopters on standby, live streams active, social media primed. Victor wouldn't be able to resist the bait. Right on cue, Victor's black SUVs appeared at both ends of the street. His men emerged like shadows, moving through the crowd with practiced intimidation. Elliot noted the positions of Detective Harris's undercover officers, scattered strategically throughout the gathering. "These people call us criminals." Victor's voice boomed as he approached the podium. "But who really destroys communities? The businessman creating jobs, or the parasites who refuse to work? Jobs?" Frank stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly for the cameras. "Like forcing teenagers into your trafficking ring? Like burning down businesses that won't launder your drug money?" Victor's smile was razor sharp. "Careful, old man. Slander is a serious crime. So is murder," Elliot called out, moving to stand beside Frank. "Want to tell everyone what happened to Miguel Ramirez?" The tension crackled as Victor's men closed in. Cameras swiveled to capture every angle. "You just can't help yourself? Can you?" Victor nodded to his men. "Take care of him. Make it look good." The attack was swift and brutal. Rico and Marcus led the charge, their fists connecting with practiced precision. But Elliot had positioned himself perfectly. Every blow captured in high definition, every act of violence broadcast live across the city. "Stop this!" Maria screamed as blood sprayed from Elliot's split lip. "Someone help him." No one help. Elliot managed between blows. "Let everyone see what he really is." Victor watched with growing unease as the cameras kept rolling, capturing his men's violence in graphic detail. His phone buzzed continuously, probably associates warning him about the optics. Enough, he finally called, but the damage was done. Detective Harris stepped forward, badge raised. "Victor Rodriguez, you and your men are under arrest for assault conspiracy. You have no authority here," Victor sneered. "This is still my neighborhood." "Not anymore." Harris produced a warrant. "FBI's been building a case for months. Your pet officers couldn't bury the evidence fast enough." "Evidence?" Victor laughed. "From where? A homeless man's fantasies? Who's going to believe?" "I'll believe Elliot Morgan." Maria's voice cut through the chaos. The words slipped out before she could stop them, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. The crowd went silent. Camera lights intensified as reporters sensed a bigger story. "What did you say?" Victor turned slowly. Elliot wiped blood from his face, straightening to his full height. The practiced stoop of John Davis fell away, replaced by the confident posture of a man who commanded boardrooms. She said, "Elliot Morgan." He repeated clearly, "CEO of Morgan Technologies. And yes, for the past 4 months, I've been living on these streets, documenting everything." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed frantically. The homeless community murmured in shock, connecting dots they should have seen before. "It's true." Emma stepped forward, holding up her credentials. "As Mr. Morgan's attorney, I can confirm his identity. Everything has been documented, verified, and submitted to the proper authorities." Victor's face contorted with rage and disbelief. The billionaire tech mogul? Playing homeless? "You expect people to believe?" "I expect people to believe their own eyes." Elliot cut him off. "Everything you've done, everything you've hidden, is now exposed." He turned to address the cameras directly. "4 months ago, my brother Danny died under the 7th Street Bridge. Another homeless victim that society ignored. I couldn't save him, but I could honor his memory by exposing the corruption that preys on the vulnerable." The story spilled out, his brother's struggles, his own guilt, his decision to go undercover. As he spoke, more community members stepped forward to share their experiences, their pain, their determination to reclaim their neighborhood. Victor tried to regain control. How touching. The guilty rich boy playing savior. "Tell me, how much did you pay these people to participate in your little drama? How much does your conscience cost?" "You want to talk about money?" Elliot challenged. "Let's talk about the Hope Foundation. Your perfect money laundering operation, using charity to clean drug profits and human trafficking revenues." He nodded to Emma, who distributed documents to the press. Bank records, transfer histories, shell company connections. Everything, including your payoffs to city officials and police officers. Victor's phone buzzed again. His face darkened as he read the message. "Your accounts are being frozen," Elliot continued. "Your political protection is evaporating. Your entire empire is crumbling, Victor. And do you know why? Because you never saw the homeless as people. You saw them as invisible, powerless, easy targets. Like your brother?" Victor sneered, making one last attempt to wound. "The junkie who died in the gutter?" The crowd gasped, but Elliot remained calm. "My brother was sick, and society failed him. I failed him. But his death opened my eyes to what people like you do. How you exploit suffering. How you profit from despair." He addressed the cameras again. "Morgan Technologies is establishing a $100 million foundation, controlled by this community, not corrupt officials, to rebuild this neighborhood. Affordable housing, job training, medical care, addiction treatment. Everything my brother needed, but couldn't find." The tide was turning. Victor saw it in the faces around him, felt it in the way his own men began stepping back. Power recognized power, and suddenly the homeless man they'd beaten wasn't just a nuisance. He was Elliot Morgan, one of the richest men in the city. "You think money makes you untouchable?" Victor's hand moved toward his jacket. "Let's see if bullets care about bank accounts." "Don't." Detective Harris's voice was sharp. Her weapon was already drawn. "It's over, Victor." Other officers emerged from the crowd, weapons ready. Victor's men raised their hands, survival instincts overriding loyalty. "Officer Jenkins," Victor called to his corrupt ally. "Take care of this." But Jenkins was already backing away. "Sorry, boss. Can't help you anymore." One by one, Victor's supporters melted away. The corrupt officers, the bought officials, the business owners he'd terrorized, all abandoning the sinking ship. "Cowards," he screamed. "After everything I've done for you, done for us?" Maria stepped forward. "You destroyed lives, terrorized families, trafficked children. And for what? Power? Money? Look around, Victor. Look what your power has brought you." The community pressed closer, phones recording every moment of his downfall. The invisible ones he'd terrorized were invisible no longer. "You're under arrest," Detective Harris declared, moving to cuff him. "You have the right to remain silent." "This isn't over," Victor snarled as officers led him away. "You hear me, Morgan? This isn't over." But it was over. The cameras captured everything. Victor's arrest, the community's triumph, the promise of renewal rising from the ashes of Hope's table. Afterward, Elliot faced the community, he'd lived among for 4 months. The truth was out, and with it came difficult questions. "Why didn't you tell us?" Tommy asked, hurt in his voice. "We trusted you." "I needed to understand," Elliot replied honestly. "Not just the corruption, but the daily reality of life on the streets. What my brother went through. What all of you go through. You could have died," Frank said gruffly. "Victor's men nearly killed you several times. Maybe I deserved to." Elliot's voice was quiet. "I ignored Danny's calls for help. Told myself I was too busy, too important. Sending money was easier than facing his pain." Maria touched his arm gently. "You honored his memory by helping others. By standing up when no one else would." The media wanted interviews, sound bites, photo ops. But Elliot had one more task. He walked to the 7th Street Bridge, to the spot where they'd found Danny. "It's done, little brother," he whispered. "The neighborhood's going to change. Real change this time. No more looking away." Emma found him there later. "The FBI's moving on Victor's international connections. His entire network is unraveling." "Good." Elliot touched the rough concrete where his brother had died. "What about the foundation?" "Papers are ready. The community will have full control, with oversight to prevent another Hope Foundation situation. Maria's agreed to be on the board." Elliot nodded. "And Morgan Technologies?" "The board is concerned about your extended absence. But the PR team is already spinning this as a humanitarian investigation. Your stock is actually up." He laughed softly. "Of course it is." Standing, he looked at his reflection in a puddle. The beard, the worn clothes, the marks of his journey. "Time to go back?" "Not yet." Emma smiled. "The community's gathering at the church. Maria's cooking. They want to thank you properly, now that they know the truth." The meal was different from the usual soup kitchen fare. Everyone had brought something, creating a feast of shared dishes and shared hope. The homeless and housed ate together, barriers broken by their common struggle. Elliot sat with Frank, Tommy, Rose, and the others who'd become his friends. They shared stories, laughed about moments that seemed different in hindsight, and planned for the future. "The new Hope's table will be bigger," Maria announced. "With a shelter attached, counseling services, job training. A real community center. Built by the community, for the community," Elliot added. "No more corrupt foundations, no more exploitation." As night fell, he looked around the crowded church basement. These people had become his family over the past 4 months, teaching him more about courage and dignity than any boardroom ever had. Tomorrow, he would return to his old life. But part of him would always be John Davis, the homeless man who helped expose corruption and bring hope back to a forgotten neighborhood. Danny would have liked that. Dawn broke over the city as SWAT teams moved into position. Detective Harris had coordinated with FBI tactical units for simultaneous raids across the city. Victor's entire operation would fall in one synchronized sweep. Elliot watched from Harris's command center as the raids began. Surveillance feeds showed heavily armed officers breaching Victor's compound, his shipping warehouses, his money laundering fronts. Police. On the ground. The feeds caught Victor's shocked face as officers burst through his bedroom door. For once, the gang leader had no smooth words, no escape plan. His empire was crumbling in real time. "Multiple suspects in custody," crackled the radio. "Evidence secured, including hard drives and documents. They're hitting City Hall now," Harris reported, watching another feed. "Councilman Green just tried to delete files. Too late." The morning news exploded with footage of corrupt officials being let out in handcuffs. Judge Martinez, who had buried evidence of Victor's crimes. Police Captain Reynolds, who had coordinated protection. Thomas Warner, director of the Fraudulent Hope Foundation. 14 arrests so far, Emma updated, scrolling through messages, including 3 state officials and a federal prosecutor. Victor's insurance policy is becoming his prosecution list. Elliot watched the feeds silently, remembering every person these men had hurt, every life they destroyed, including Danny's. "Detective," a SWAT officer called out. "You need to see this." The feed showed a hidden room in Victor's compound. The walls were covered with surveillance photos, hundreds of them. Elliot recognized himself in many, both as John Davis and in his real identity. "He was obsessed with you," Harris said quietly. "These go back months before you went undercover. He had someone watching your company, your home. He knew Elliot realized. He knew about Danny. Maybe even. He couldn't finish the thought. Harris squeezed his shoulder. We'll find out. I promise you that. The raids continued through the morning. Victor's international connections scrambled to distance themselves, unknowingly providing more evidence as they tried to cover their tracks. By noon, the story had gone national. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood, covering the dramatic fall of a criminal empire and the shocking revelation of the billionaire who had exposed it. But Elliot was already focused on rebuilding. 3 months later, the transformation was underway. Construction crews worked steadily, converting abandoned buildings into affordable housing units. The old warehouse district, once a hub for human trafficking, now housed job training centers and medical clinics. The New Hope's table rose from the ashes of the old, 3 times larger and built to Maria's exact specifications. Solar panels crowned the roof, and the industrial kitchen could serve hundreds. But Maria had insisted on keeping the original sign, salvaged from the ruins. To remind us where we came from, she explained, touching the scorched letters. And how far we've come. The community center attached to the kitchen hummed with activity. Computer labs offered classes in digital literacy. Medical professionals provided free checkups and addiction counseling. Legal aid offices helped people navigate bureaucracy and reclaim their rights. But the heart of the operation was Frank's mentorship program. You've got to want to change, he told a group of teenagers, his gruff voice gentle. But wanting isn't enough. You need help, support, people who believe in you. That's what we're here for. Elliot watched from the doorway as Frank worked with the youth, many of them former gang members or children of addicts. The old man had found his calling, using his hard-won wisdom to guide others away from the paths he'd seen destroy so many lives. They listened to him, Maria said, joining Elliot. He's lived it. Like you did. I only lived it for 4 months, Elliot reminded her. Frank lived it for years. Sometimes it's not how long you live something, but what you learn from it. She handed him a coffee. The Foundation Board meeting is starting. We're reviewing new proposals for mental health services. The Morgan Foundation for Community Renewal, as it was officially known, operated differently from traditional charities. The board consisted entirely of community members, with strict oversight to prevent corruption. Every decision required input from those it would affect. Tommy's scholarship program is ready to launch, Maria continued as they walked to the meeting room. 5 full rides to City College, priority for homeless youth. He insisted on naming it after Danny. Elliot's throat tightened. He didn't have to do that. He wanted to. We all did. Danny's story, it changed things. Changed you. Changed all of us. The board meeting was productive. Rose presented a proposal for arts therapy programs. Jason's mother had ideas for expanding job training. Mr. Chen offered his restaurant as a training site for culinary students. The Neighborhood Business Association is on board, he reported. Victor's protection racket is replaced by real community support. After the meeting, Elliot reviewed construction updates with Emma. The Affordable Housing Initiative was ahead of schedule, with strict regulations to prevent gentrification from pushing out current residents. The SEC investigation into Victor's financial network is expanding, she informed him. 3 major banks implicated in the money laundering. Your testimony next week could blow it wide open. Elliot studied the blueprints for the next phase. What about the police reform proposal? Moving forward, Detective Harris is heading the new anti-corruption task force. They're implementing your suggested oversight measures. The next day brought the moment Elliot had both anticipated and dreaded. A public speaking engagement at City Hall, addressing the systemic issues that enabled Victor's rise to power. The audience included politicians, business leaders, and media. But Elliot focused on the community members filling the back rows, the people who had lived the reality he was describing. My brother Danny was more than his addiction, Elliot began, his voice steady. He was brilliant, kind funny. He loved science fiction and could quote entire movies from memory. He wrote poetry that he never showed anyone. He was a person, complex, flawed, but worthy of dignity. Worthy of help. The room was silent as he continued. But society didn't see him that way. We have built systems that criminalize poverty, that treat addiction as a moral failure rather than a medical condition, that push people into shadows where predators like Victor thrive. He described his months undercover the daily struggles and indignities faced by the homeless community, the way society looked away, enabling corruption to flourish. Change isn't just about building shelters or funding programs, though those are vital. It's about changing how we see people, how we value human dignity, how we fight for justice even when, especially when, it's difficult. The speech received a standing ovation, but Elliot barely noticed. His eyes were on Frank, Maria, and the others who had become his family during those 4 months. Their approval meant more than any official accolade. Later that afternoon, Elliot drove to the cemetery. It was his first visit since returning to his regular life, though he'd thought of Danny every day. The grave was simple, marked with a plain headstone. Elliot had resisted the urge to replace it with something more elaborate. Danny would have hated that. "Hey, little brother," he said softly, placing fresh flowers. "Sorry I haven't visited. Been busy trying to fix things. The things I should have helped you fix." He sat on the grass, not caring about his expensive suit. "You would love Maria's new kitchen. The food's still not as good as Mom's, but the coffee's better. Frank's turning into quite the mentor. Reminds me of how you used to help younger kids in the neighborhood." Wind rustled through nearby trees as Elliot continued updating his brother. He described the changes in the neighborhood, the lives being rebuilt, the hope replacing fear. "I understand now, Danny. What you were trying to tell me all those times I sent money instead of really listening. It was never just about having somewhere to sleep or getting clean. It was about being seen, being valued, being part of something larger than ourselves." Tears fell freely now, but Elliot didn't wipe them away. "I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. I'm sorry I looked away. But I promise you, I swear to you, I will never look away again. Your story is helping change lives. Your memory is inspiring people to fight for justice." He touched the headstone gently. "I love you, little brother. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other brothers, other sisters, other families get the help we should have given you." The sun was setting as Elliot drove back through the neighborhood. The streets that had once been his home looked different now, not just because of the physical changes, but because he saw them through new eyes. Construction crews were finishing for the day at the new residential complex. The sign out front read Danny's Place, Supportive Housing Community. Below it, smaller letters quoted his brother's favorite poem. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." At Hope's table, the dinner crowd was gathering. Maria's voice carried clearly, giving instructions to volunteer servers. Frank sat with his youth group, their laughter mixing with the sounds of clinking plates and friendly conversation. Tommy waved from the computer lab, where he was teaching a literacy class. Rose's art therapy group had painted a mural on the side of the building. Faces of the community, including Danny's, emerging from darkness into light. Elliot parked his car and walked the streets he'd once walked as John Davis. People greeted him warmly, no longer surprised to see a billionaire strolling their neighborhood. He was simply part of their community now, one of many working to maintain the change they'd fought so hard to achieve. The sun's last rays caught the New Hope Center's windows, making them glow like beacons in the gathering dusk. Where Victor's empire had once ruled through fear, a different kind of power now held sway. The power of unity, of compassion, of unwavering determination to create something better. "Coming in for dinner?" Maria called from the doorway. Inside, Frank was setting up for his evening support group. New faces mixed with familiar ones, all finding their place in the rebuilding community. "Wouldn't miss it," Elliot replied, climbing the steps to join his chosen family. The neighborhood had been transformed, but the greatest transformation had been in the hearts of its people. They had faced darkness together and emerged stronger. They had learned to see each other, really see each other, and in doing so, had created something remarkable. Danny would have loved it. What would you do if you had billions at your disposal? Would you risk everything? Your comfort, your safety, your identity, to fight for justice and change a broken system? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who believe in the power of second chances. Hit that notification bell to join us for more incredible tales of transformation, redemption, and the extraordinary courage found in ordinary places. Remember, as Danny's favorite poem said, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sometimes it takes just one person to help it take flight.